In the original, English Bibles, like in the 1611 King James, they originally included the Apocrypha, including Ben Sira, or as they call it, Ecclesiasticus.
Yes, except Presbyterians from Irvine in Scotland do not read the Apocrypha.
But is it in the printed Bibles?
I'm not sure it would have been
now
in their
they've removed
printed
it,
Bible.
but... Okay.
So they were not familiar with it.
Oh, really?
Which is why they didn't recognize it. Now, they had a remarkable knowledge of the languages and the text, but they didn't recognize the text. And they said in one of their articles that the reason is because it was part of the Apocrypha, and as good Presbyterians, they didn't read that.
Okay, fair enough.
So Schechter, now how does Schechter recognize that this one, so it's a one leaf, it's a one leaf of medieval paper, so it's 10th century at the earliest. Mm-hmm. It's very badly water damaged.
It's not on parchment, it's on paper.
Not on parchment, so it's a medieval copy, right? Okay. So again, he has to make a great leap of faith or understanding to actually see this as something that the text originally dates back to the 2nd century BCE, and far older than the copy on which he's holding, right? And so that this is transmission of the original text and not some kind of medieval paraphrase or translation.
Or it could have been translated back from Greek into Hebrew.
Which you do get. So in later periods, you do get retranslations into Hebrew of works that are no longer extant in Hebrew.
Like a version of Josephus, Josephon.
Yeah, and also I think Book of Tobit, as well. At some. But in this case, he was sure that this was a copy of the original Hebrew. And why is interesting is because Schechter knew more about the Book of Sirach than anyone else in England at that time. Because in the 1860s, he had written an article where he had attempted to piece together the Book of Ben Sira from the quotations that he could find in all of the Jewish sources. A bit like a jigsaw, he went through all the Jewish sources, wherever they said, Amar Bar Sira or Bar Sira Amar. Mm-hmm. He took those quotes and he attempted to reconstruct the book. Yeah. So he knew the book in Greek, obviously, he knew it in the various languages. Wow. But he attempted to see how much of the Hebrew text was still extant. Mm-hmm. Now, the end result of that article, which was in the JQR, the Jewish Quarterly Review, where Schechter published all this stuff, was that he could only reconstruct a tiny bit of it, because everyone quotes the same bits of Ben Sira. Mm-hmm. But he could probably quite reliably say the last person to have actually knowingly read the book, and quoted from it, was Saadia Gaon, so 10th century Iraq, Baghdad, and Hayyan, so early 11th century Baghdad.
So Solomon Schechter really was the guy to stumble upon this page from the Cairo Genizah.
Exactly.
Maybe nobody else in the world or in England for sure would have recognized it.
No, that's why that's
amazing.
There's this serendipity about the whole story. Of all the people to show it to, the one man in England who would recognize it, what it was. Now, Schechter had a kind of, remarkable knowledge of Jewish sources. He was able to catalogue, as you had to in those days, because you didn't have Google, to look up the text of things. So he was able to catalogue our collection, with the minimal, access to reference works and so on. But when it came to Ben Sira, in one evening, he was able to recognise that this was the text, and he convinced himself that this was the original text and not some medieval retranslation by some Jew in Egypt who had a Greek version. He wanted to reproduce a Hebrew version, and he argued at length in articles, as to why this was the case, because nobody agreed with him. So he had rivals in Oxford, so there's Neubauer, and then there's the professor of Arabic, Margoliouth, who argued vehemently against his discovery, saying, "No, look at it. The Hebrew, as you said, the Hebrew's bad, right? No, this is not the product of the biblical era. This is some ignorant, and they're terribly high-minded about it. This is some ignorant medieval Jew who can barely speak Hebrew, scribbling this down." And Schechter knew that he was right, because the text made more sense than the Greek translation, because the Greek is not a great translation of Ben Sira, and of course it itself has been corrupted in transmission. So. And the text preserves those kinds of features that you expect from a Hebrew Bible text. So it's got parallelism, it's got punning, it's got wordplay that you don't get in the Greek.
Wow, that's amazing. Right? That is amazing. That in itself is like this amazing pearl. And since the time of Schechter, we now have several manuscripts of this, right? Not complete manuscripts. So Schechter represents different manuscripts of.
So from what Schechter found, and in his subsequent searches, and what other scholars have found, and we still relatively recently uncovered a few pieces more of Ben Sira in the collection. I think we now have 7 different manuscripts of it. So not 7 fragments, seven original manuscripts in varying numbers of fragments. So there were at least 7 copies in transmission.
So how
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices. To hear the rest of this conversation, head over to nehemiaswall.com and become a support team member today.